Yo, what's good? It's Mistora. Today, I got a pretty crazy mod for Baldur's Gate 3 that I want to showcase to you all. The mod is called DnD 2024 All-in-One, and in many ways lends a playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 to feel like an entirely new experience for those of us that have already played through the game a few times. Now, I'm going to take a look at the details of the mod specifically, as well as what it does and doesn't do in its entirety. But first, at a base level, how does a mod accomplishes, and what exactly is DnD 2024? So many of you are already aware of the explanation that I'm about to get into, and if that's the case, just feel free to skip to the next chapter of the video, but I'll go ahead and explain it for those of you that aren't. Baldur's Gate 3 in gameplay functions based on the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition rule set, with some mostly minor changes here and there that Larian have thrown in, right? Such as shoving and using potions being bonus actions, whereas in 5e, that isn't the case. But honestly, if you play BG3, I'd say you're about 70% equipped to play D&D at a tabletop as far as rules goes. You know, you have most of the game down. However, 5th edition released back in 2014, and in 2024, we got a new version of D&D, essentially called D&D 2024, although I tend to call it 5.5e, as it's very similar to 5th edition, just with many welcome changes thrown in the mix to keep things fresh. But for the purposes of this video, I'll be referring to it as D&D 2024. And yeah, as a DM, you know, Dungeon Master for tabletop D&D and a player occasionally, I'd say that Dungeons & Dragons 2024 does change enough about the game to where it still feels familiar while offering some fresh gameplay at the same time. D&D 2024 makes several changes to some of the rules, classes, subclasses, backgrounds, which now have feats attached to them. Feats themselves have been added, with many of the original ones being modified. Races and sub-races have been added, as well as having some of the original ones be modified too. And there's even some new cantrips and spells that have been added, with, again, some of the existing ones, they've also been modified as well. And after playing this mod that implements D&D 2024 into Baldur's Gate 3 magnificently, I can happily say that, again, it does feel like a nice, you know, fresh experience on a new playthrough, even more so with the help of a few accessory mods I'm going to recommend alongside this one for those wanting to start a new playthrough with it. Those mods being first, extra encounters and mini bosses, which adds several new locations / lore appropriate fights to the game. I mean, thematically, some of these fights, they're so damn cool. Like, I'm not gonna spoil them, but some of these make so much sense story-wise and are such a spectacle that they truly feel like they should have been in the base game all this time. Now, I accompany that mod with an XP rebalance mod that adjusts XP gain to compensate for the fact that you're gonna be fighting more. And the last mod I'll recommend as an accessory is the Ancient Mega Pack plus REL mod. It's an acronym, don't know exactly what it means. I'll look it up, you'll see it on screen. But yeah, it's a mod that keeps loot fresh by adding close to 500 new, like, meticulously balanced items to the game, and somewhat randomizes their acquisition during a run. Like, you're not gonna find anything clearly intended for a level 12 character early on, but within each section of the game, the items you can find are gonna be balanced but randomly distributed. Altogether, these accessory mods keep a new playthrough fresh by adding encounters in places that you've never gotten into fights before, bringing me back to that feeling I had in my first few playthroughs where I'd end up surprised because of accidentally running into an encounter, some of which are actually pretty damn challenging, by the way. I've had to run away from a few of them just because I was definitely unprepared to be in some of these fights, you know, my spell slots, my character's HP, and what have you. The slower XP gain is honestly quite fun, as it makes encounters more tense because you don't level up as quickly. Like, I've done almost everything except for clearing out the Goblin Camp and the Underdark in Act 1, and I'm just now about to hit level 5. But thanks to, having more actual fights to get into, it doesn't feel bad. It does still feel quite balanced. And the loot mod I mentioned makes it so that you can't rely on items being where they typically are. For example, the amulet that lets you speak with dead at the beginning of the game, it just straight up wasn't there for me. And many other items that might define builds for you could be somewhere completely different in the game now, really forcing you to think on your toes by having you craft your builds only with the items you have on hand. All of that combined with the insane overhaul that is the DnD 2024 all-in-one mod, yes, that's a mouthful, on an honor mode playthrough, honestly feels pretty damn close to playing this game for the first time all over again, at least as close as I can possibly get until some of those new campaign mods that are being worked on do eventually release. With all that out the way, let's dive into the exact details of this DnD 2024 all-in-one mod proper and take a look at just how much it changes in Baldur's Gate 3. Now let's take a look at the details of this thing in order to showcase just how much this single mod completely overhauls the experience of Baldur's Gate 3 by bringing it more in line with the new 2024 version of D&D. This mod was created by the incredibly talented Yoonmoonsick. First of all, I want to give them their shout out before I do anything else, not just for the mod overall itself, which is amazing as you'll see, but for just how diligent they've been when it comes to keeping this thing updated, because I kid you not, I've been keeping an eye on it. I've seen multiple updates a day be pushed out by this mod author, including anything from bug fixes to just adjustments and tweaks, all the way to additional features being added to the mod that wasn't present when it first launched. So yeah, big shout out to Yoonmoonsick, and just thank you so much for all your hard work for this thing. It starts with the introduction, which goes over some stuff that I've already been yapping about in this video, but real quick, I want to talk about compatibility. As it says right here, this mod does not consider compatibility issues with other ones. Now, the main other mod that I assume people are going to want to work alongside this one and use with it is the 5e spells mod, which is very popular. It adds a bunch of new spells to Baldur's Gate 3 that weren't initially there, that do actually exist in Dungeons and Dragons from other source books. And from my playtesting specifically, I really didn't encounter any issues with those two working together. For my playtesting, everything worked fine for the most part, except for the Warlock spell list. There was some funky stuff going on there, and thanks to a few extra mods that I downloaded, I was, with workarounds, let's say, able to get everything working. If you're curious about what I did and that's a problem for you, just let me know in the comment section and I'll tell you how I fixed the Warlock spell list stuff. But yeah, for the most part, they play together, they get along just fine. And for class and subclass mods, I have a few installed while I was running this one, and I also didn't really experience any issues. There were funky things here and there, but for the most part, classes and extra subclasses work just fine, really, with no issue. But just letting you know, you might have some issues with some of your other favorite mods is all. And for the changes, it goes into the stuff that I've already been talking about, how much this mod and D&D 2024 change up 5th edition and by extension Baldur's Gate 3. For caution, there's a pretty important note for crashes if you update the mod or install the mod during a playthrough. I didn't have this issue, but just be aware of it. And we're gonna go into detail on just how much this mod changes things up, starting with backgrounds, because backgrounds you pick when you make your character at level 1. But now, other than giving you just some, skill proficiencies, now backgrounds also give you what's called an origin feat, a feat at level 1, which is going to help with really driving home that fantasy of what you want your character to be right out the gate. And there's some really cool stuff here, stuff that honestly, quite frankly, makes a lot of sense, such as the criminal background getting the alert feat so they can't be surprised. In Baldur's Gate 3, it still works that way. The entertainer feat gets performer. Entertainer background gets a performer feat. My bad. Makes a ton of sense, right? Me specifically, for my current playthrough, I went with the Wayfarer background to get the lucky feat, and it's honestly awesome having that at level 1, but also really helps me feel like I built up my character, and my character has a lot more going to them at level 1, because in the past, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition characters could feel really simple at level 1, but this adds a nice bit of complexity to things without going too far, and it honestly is one of my favorite parts of the newest edition of Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to come back to races, but I want to show y'all some stuff that's a little bit more impactful in terms of how this mod changes things up. So let's scroll down. We're going to come back to that. We are, but let's kind of take a quick detour. 1 second. And let's take a look at the rules. So how does this mod and the new version of D&D change up the rules, right? So first things first, now for attacks, you can now make an attack as a part of the action to equip a weapon. So if you're in your inventory and you are switching out weapons, yes, it does take your action, but you'll also still be able to make an attack. I think that's great and just kind of simplifies the game a little bit. Shoving in Baldur's Gate 3 previously, in D&D 5th edition, it was always this way, but now shoving is an action as opposed to a bonus action like it should be. And there's now, I think 5e had tripping as an action. I think it did. I don't know if it did, but it's here now and it costs an action. As an action, you can try to trip someone up and make them prone. Also, that was added is the break free action, which when you're caught in a spell like web or what have you, or an effect like web, you can now use your action to try to break out of that thing. The dodge action was also added. I love that. Distraction, aka help, was also added. I love that as well. And jump, it used to cost a bonus action. Now it's just based on your movement distance. It's a welcome change. It's something that I honestly quite like. And spell casting, just like in D&D proper, which has been the case for 5e, you can now only cast a leveled spell of 1 or higher once per turn. In BG3, you used to be able to just cast as many level spells. Honestly, great work on a lot of this stuff, and the only thing I'm missing is really the ready action, but I honestly feel like that's something that's quite hard to implement in this game. But outside of that, I really love what was done here for the rules. It's some stuff that's in the new version 2024 D&D, some stuff that's already been there, but in general, I love all of what I'm seeing here, and it does change up the game quite dramatically. The next thing that changes up the game quite dramatically, honestly, one of the main draws, main attractive points of this new version of Dungeons and Dragons in general, whether it's Baldur's Gate 3 or tabletop. Side note, initiative was changed to a D4 to a D20, and that's how it is in 5e, and currently that's been the case for a while now. It just wasn't like that in BG3. Sorry, got sidetracked. But one of the main draws of this new version of D&D was the weapon mastery system. Each weapon has a mastery property, and it's something that martials are supposed to be able to use, and to kind of help bridge that gap between martial fighting style characters and spellcasters who are honestly quite ridiculous. I know, Warlock's my favorite, right? Now, weapons can do all sorts of crazy things unlimitedly. Like there's no resource attached to this, like with some of these special attacks that BG3 let you do with weapons. That's not the case. Weapon masteries are just infinite, and they can do all sorts of dope stuff, such as cleave if you use a great axe or a halberd. If you hit a creature with an attack roll using this weapon, you can make a melee attack roll with the weapon against a second creature within 5 feet that's also within reach. Awesome, I love that. You have things like Nick, which is amazing for dual wielding, I guess you could say martials. That's, any of them, fighter, rogue, whoever, right? But Nick, what it allows you to do is when you have a light weapon in both your hands, when you make an attack as part of the attack action, instead of using a bonus action, you can just go ahead and with that offhand weapon, make a free attack. If you got 2 light weapons, you can just do that. No need to use your bonus action. It frees up your bonus action. That's something I really love about the weapon mastery system. There's some other great stuff in here as well, like for great clubs and heavy crossbows, you get push, where if you hit a creature with that weapon, you can just straight up push them up to 10 feet straight away from you if they're large or smaller. You got sap, which if you hit a creature with the weapon, they get disadvantage on their next attack roll. There's just so much cool stuff here that really diversifies how martials are gonna play and incentivizes them to carry multiple weapons on their person if they have mastery in them, to kind of help diversify them. In a way, it not entirely, but it does help a bit to mimic the flexibility of spells. If they really need to be tripping up someone, they can bring a weapon with them that will topple them so they can knock targets prone. If they really want to be pushing enemies away, they can bring a push weapon. If they want to do a little bit of damage, no matter what, they can bring a weapon that has graze so that even if they miss an attack, they'll still do some damage. It really diversifies these characters a lot, and I dig it. Okay, so we're kind of hopping all over the place, but now I want to take a look at what I believe is the section that is next in line, or I mean, you could even argue is the biggest in terms of modifying gameplay for this new version of D&D and by extension this mod, and that's some of the new stuff that's been added to classes and by extension subclasses. There's a lot. This section is long, so I'm not gonna go into everything. Please check out the mod page for yourself or pause this video at certain points if there's something specifically that you're curious about. But I'm gonna show off and talk about a few things just to illustrate how awesome some of this new 2024 D&D stuff truly is. So we're gonna start off with the Barbarian. Their rage has changed to where they can kind of just rage for a hot minute now. Like rage in 2024 D&D, you can just use a bonus action to just extend your rage. And there's like no limit to this. You can just use a bonus action and keep your rage going even out of combat. Before, you would need to be making attacks to extend your rage or be receiving damage. That's not the case anymore. Now, the way this mod implements this is they essentially just put like a 600 turn timer on your rage, and then they let you use a bonus action to extend it. There's some other cool stuff in here for Barbarian as well, but I'm going to go to their subclasses for now. Mainly, I want to talk about Path of the Wild Heart, which has a really dope change to it. Initially, when you picked up this subclass, you would just out the gate have to pick a single path, a single, I guess you could say, animal aspect that would define your new rage ability. Now you have access to all of them, and you just pick which one you want to use when you rage. So these barbarians can rage with the spirit of a bear in them to be resistant to pretty much every type of damage, or they can rage with the aspect of a wolf, and that has its own features. Rage with the aspect of an elk, that has more features. I think it has something to do with movement speed, so that's really cool for them. And I really like some of their new subclasses. Well, one of them is new. The Path of the World Tree is pretty new. At level 3, your rage taps into the life force of the World Tree. It's very, I don't know, like, what is that? I don't want to say Celtic mythology. Some of y'all are going to crucify me for this. I don't know. Norse mythology. There it is. It's very Norse mythology inspired. So now when they activate their rage, they gain, number of temporary hit points. And at the start of each of their turns, while their rage is active, they can choose another creature within 10 feet to restore hit points to. So some really awesome stuff here. And then you have what is probably, if I was going to play a barbarian, one of the subclasses I would pick, Path of the Zealot. It has a lot of the same stuff that it's been had, but still it's just nice to see here included in this mod. Not going to talk too much about bards here, but they get a really cool addition or slash change, I guess you could say, as well. Now they can expend a spell slot, no action required, to get back one of their bardic inspiration. Really useful in a pinch at starting at 5th level. And the next thing for bards I want to talk about, if I was going to play a bard, which I'm actually considering doing so soon, thanks to this mod, it's going to be College of Dance. I really love the flavor of this subclass. They're a bard that uses a lot of unarmed strikes. So similar to Monk, but just with a bard themed over it, of course, because they're not this martial artist, this monk type of character. No, they're dancing. So they're just kind of dancing across the battlefield and kicking butt. And I love that aspect to it. You can kind of read the features here. I kind of more so just wanted to talk about the class identity, a subclass identity, but I do think the features play into that very well, and they're listed here, as you can see. So let's move along to the cleric. For the base class, clerics actually got a good amount of love, I'll say. Clerics at level 1 now have to pick a divine order. So without taking their domain, their subclass into consideration, just as a base class at level 1, you're making a pretty big choice for your cleric. Is your cleric going to be a protector, so they can use heavy armor now and gain access to martial weapons? Or are they going to be a thaumaturge cleric, getting, some more cantrips and getting some boost to some of their role play checks in Arcana and Religion. And if I scroll down here, Druid has something similar where they have to pick a primal order. They essentially function exactly the same. One primal order is going to give you access to better armor and martial weapons, and the other more spells and boost to outside of combat roles, as you can see here, right? So I love that clerics, again, it adds, I like that little bit of a bump to adding just a bit of complexity to your character build right out the gate, while not being too much. It adds just enough, in my opinion, with stuff like this. For those of y'all that love fighter, I think they got some much needed love with the new version of DnD and here in this mod. One of the best changes, one of the changes I love the most is in terms of second wind. Now fighters don't get just 1 second wind per short rest. They start with 2 uses of it per short rest, and as they level up, they're gonna get more uses of it. At level 4, they have 3 uses of it, and at level 10, they have 4. And the fighter's base kit kind of struggled outside of combat, I would feel like. They didn't really get anything that helped them with roleplay, really only in terms of fighting and getting into encounters, right? Now, they get level 2 Tactical Mind. They can use one of their second wind charges, so that's kind of one of the reasons they have more of them. They can use one of their second wind charges to, whenever they fail an ability check, they can use that second wind to roll a d10 and then add whatever that result is to the ability check. That's amazing. I love that. It gives them something to use their fighter kit for outside of combat, which I'm always a fan of. The other change they got is at level 5, they can use their second wind as a bonus action. Whenever they do, they can move half of their movement speed without provoking opportunity attacks. It makes them this very mobile and maneuverable force on the battlefield. I love that. And at level 9, Indomitable. If you fail a saving throw, add a bonus equal to your fighter level, and it's just something that helps them out with saving throws. Not being able to use it until you finish a long rest, I find kind of, I do think that could have been every short rest and not really have been broken, but hey, what can you do? They did get a lot of love in general that, in my opinion, is gonna make fighter a lot more pleasurable to use in combat, or just in general overall in terms of their base kit. And we didn't even get into subclasses, which they did get some nice changes. It doesn't list it here, but for Eldritch Knight, you no longer have the restriction. I don't know if that's was the case for Baldur's Gate 3, but in 2014, in 5th edition, Eldritch Knights and Arcane Tricksters, the rogue subclass, used to be limited to certain school types for the spells they can learn. Now, Eldritch Knights and Arcane Trickster rogues, they can just learn any wizard spell they want. It's much better. It makes the subclass feel a lot more dope, and it's just a much welcome change. Champion got some love too. I'm not going to go into all their changes, but they were considered a pretty subpar subclass, and they actually got some love. So it's nice to see that they got some much needed adjustments as well. And the Psi Warrior, which is a psionic based, mind power based fighter subclass, was added to the game. Honestly, out of any fighter, dang near, if I'm going to play a fighter, it's either going to be an Arcane Knight or a Psi Warrior, because the stuff they can do is actually pretty dope. Take a look at the subclass, pause to read if you like, but this is easily one of the most flavorful and cool ways to play a fighter, in my opinion. Monks got some changes. Like I said, I'm not going to go into super detail on every class, but they got some cool stuff, like for their martial arts die, or, you know, not that right here, where is it? Yeah, patient defense. They got some cool stuff, like you can disengage as a bonus action, or they can spend a key point, a focus point, whatever it's called now, to both disengage and dodge as a bonus action. They can do both. So they got some pretty cool toys as well. Their subclasses, I think, were changed up a little bit. Paladin, I don't know if this is always the case. I know Artificers got spellcasting at level 1 as half-casters. I want to say Paladins, and at the very least, definitely Rangers, I don't think they used to get spellcasting right out the gate. Now they do, and they got some changes to their base features as well. But I do want to talk a bit about Ranger. Paladin, I'm not going to go into that much. Feel free to read it for yourself. But Rangers, in my opinion, got some much needed changes in love that make them just a lot more fun to play with. So as I already said, they get spellcasting at level 1 now, which I'm almost positive they didn't in the past. But level 1, they also get Favored Enemy, What that does is essentially they will always have Hunter's Mark prepared, so they get the spell for free. Great. And they can, starting out, they can cast it twice without using a spell slot, and they refill those free casts during or after a long rest. That's great. I love that. And when they reach level 5 and level 9, they'll get one more use of that feature at each of those levels respectively. It helps bring in that flavor of Ranger, what they excel at. They're pretty much always going to be using Hunter's Mark, always be getting that extra damage, and it's something that I think was sorely needed for the class, and it's definitely awesome. In addition to that, we got the Fey Wanderer subclass, which I forget what source book that was from, but I'm almost positive it wasn't in the PHB back in 2014. It is here now, and it's a very, I would say, flavorful, not rogue, Ranger subclass. It's Fey themed, obviously. They get some great spells like Charm Person, Misty Step, and Summon Fey, all for completely free. They get to do a little bit of extra damage per turn with some of their dreadful, strikes feature, and just overall a really fun Ranger subclass. Gloomstalker did get adjusted. I don't exactly know what the difference between this is now off the top of my head versus what it was like in Baldur's Gate 3. I think in Baldur's Gate 3, they just straight up always got a free attack. Like every single combat, the first turn, they would get a free extra attack. I think now that's either gone or changed. I think, yeah, right here. Yeah, so when you attack a creature with weapon, you deal an extra 2d6 psychic damage, and they can use this feature a number of times equal to their wisdom modifier. So that was changed, most likely kind of a nerf from my standpoint. But the real show here, in my opinion, is Hunter. Hunter was widely regarded as not that great of a subclass, but I do think they got some very welcome changes here. Hunters now, all the features there, they had these different options for their Hunter's Prey feature. One was like Horde Slayer, there was this one called Giant Killer, and they all did different things, but you would have to pick one and be stuck with that one whenever you took the subclass. I think it was things like, oh, if the target is missing HP and you hit them, you deal extra damage to them. But another one was like, oh, if there's a bunch of enemies together, once per turn, you can hit 2 at the same time, things like that. But again, back in the day, you had to pick just one of those. Now, once per long rest, you can, not long rest, once per short rest, actually, you can swap between those features. Very adaptable, very useful. If you've been playing with one, you're like, I kind of don't like it, you could just switch to another one. I think it's a very welcome addition, and in my current playthrough, I have Shadowheart as a Hunter Ranger in my party, and honestly, she puts in work. Rogue got some goodies as well. I don't know if Steady Aim, I know it was in DnD. I actually think it was introduced with Tasha's Cauldron or everything, or Xanathar's, I can't remember, but Steady Aim is now here thanks to this mod, and basically, as long as you don't move, you can use a bonus action to give yourself advantage on your next attack roll on this turn. You can only use it again if you haven't moved. It's great. I'm glad to see it here. But also the big thing I want to talk about for rogues is Cunning Strike. It's kind of their version of extra attack, or just gives rogues something else to do besides sneaking around and just rolling sneak attack damage. You can now forgo one of your damage die for your sneak attack to do something different. You can poison targets now when you get a sneak attack, giving them the poison condition. You can trip up targets, or you can withdraw. When you use sneak attack now and you reveal yourself and you attack this target, if you use withdraw, you'll be able to get out of there now using up to half of your movement speed without provoking opportunity attacks. Some great and really cool stuff. Sorcerers get what I described to my wife essentially as Sorcerer Rage. They get this mode they can enter at level 1 for 1 minute that, as a bonus action, it's kind of like just their raw magic just kind of gets pumped up and amped up to the next level essentially. And for 1 minute, their spell save DC is higher, and they get advantage on all spell attack rolls. Some really cool stuff. Meta magic has been changed though. Twin spell kind of got gutted. If that's something you liked about Sorcerer, which I personally did, that was changed a lot, very much so. So Sorcerers got some cool stuff and they lost some toys in general, but overall I do understand it. Sorcerer's Restoration is here at level 5, a great feature. You can regain some of your sorcery points, once per long rest, and it's equal to half your sorcerer level. I think that's a great feature. And at level 7, if you have no use of that Sorcerer's Rage, innate sorcery, if they don't have any uses of that, they can spend 2 sorcery points to get a use of that back. I think that's an amazing feature. And honestly, the base rogue kit, aside from some of these meta magic changes, is kind of winning as a result, in my opinion at least. And my favorite class, which is the Warlock, honestly got the most love in my opinion, right? Now at level 2, well, first off, at level 1, they now get to choose a single invocation. Before, you had to wait to level 2 to get any invocations, if I'm not mistaken. But starting from level 1, packs were now changed. Instead of Pact of the Chain, Pact of the Blade, and Pact of the Tome being one feature you picked at level 3, they're now invocations. And if you want to use up your invocations to pick them, you can have all 3 packs on a character if you want. Now my current Warlock has Pact of the Chain and Pact of the Blade, and I am loving it. It's such an awesome feature for the Warlock. I think it's one of the best things they could do with their invocations. They also got a new invocation, which I forgot what it's called, Secrets of the something. I don't see it here, but it is in this mod. It is here because I saw it. There's an invocation that instead of taking an invocation, they can instead take an origin feat, one of those feats you get from the background. So they're not like super overpowered feats, but if instead of taking, for example, Agonizing Blast, you wanted to get the tough feat, you can do that now. Some of their investment features change, like Thirsting Blade got a change at level 11. Yeah, Devouring Blade, and they can now get 3 attacks. Warlocks used to only be able to get extra attack. Now they can essentially get multi-attack. Some really cool stuff. And level 2, Warlocks get Magical Cunning. It's a band-aid, but it is something that does help Warlock a lot, which as an action, they can get one of their packed spell slots back just for free. Don't need to take a short rest. And Baldur's Gate 3, this specifically isn't an issue because short rests are plentiful. You could take them wherever, really without consequence. But for D&D tabletop, this is huge, I will say. And a big change to Warlocks that's going to make them feel just completely different, completely fresh for those playing them for a new playthrough for BG3 with this mod, is what they change as far as their subclasses are concerned. The spells that were added to your spell list before for your Warlock subclasses, these spells you're seeing here, they used to just be added to the amount of spells you could learn. So you would have to use up one of your learned spells to get them. Now, just like many other subclasses in the game, we just get these for free, and oh my goodness, does it help so much. Getting Fairy Fire and Sleep automatically on an Archfey Warlock, which I do play right out the gate, is mad helpful. I cannot stress enough, I love it. Getting Fireball for free on a Fiend Patron Warlock is incredible, and getting things like Cure Wounds and Guiding Bolts out the gate for Celestial Patron Warlocks, that's added. It wasn't new for D&D, but it was new to the PHB, and you have it here now. Getting these spells that you may not necessarily use some of your learned spell opportunities to acquire them. You probably wouldn't do that in the past for something like Guiding Bolt maybe, or at least you would replace it later on, but now you just have it for free, so there's really no guilt about having it just ready to go in any given situation. I love it, and honestly, Warlock got some of the most love in not just this mod, but obviously D&D 2024 proper, and it makes playing the class feel so new for me specifically, as it is my favorite class, and it's one of the reasons why I love this mod and the new version of D&D as much as I do. Wizards got some changes, but I'm not gonna hold you. Like, I don't care about Wizards all that much. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I like Blade Singer. Don't get me wrong. Blade Singing Wizard as a subclass, I like Blade Singing Wizards. Them, I like. Wizards overall, and they're all right. I don't hate them. I'm just not a huge fan of them. But they got some changes too, if you want to take a look to see here. And yes, Blade Singing was added as a subclass for Wizards. For those like myself that do really enjoy the subclass, it basically turns your wizard into a capable melee fighter, and it's my go-to way for playing the class if I do end up playing a wizard. Oh, and I almost forgot. How could I forget? Because honestly, even though I said races are, I might do some editing in the video to kind of put my talk of spells somewhere else, because I am actually talking about spells last right now. But I do think in terms of importance and how much they change up the game, I do think spells should at least be towards the middle, because there was some great stuff here. There are some welcome additions cantrip wise, like Green Flame Blade and Booming Blade. If you use the 5e spells mod, you already have that stuff, but it's nice that if you don't, you still have it here. That's amazing. Sorceress Burst made it in. I know it's not the most amazing cantrip, but to me, it's just insanely fun. It's a really fun and silly cantrip, and I like that sorcerers get the option to have it. It's nice that there's a class out there, not a subclass, a class out there that besides Warlock also has its own unique cantrip to call its own. Sorcerers now join that club. There's some great changes to things like True Strike. Resistance got changed as well. Not that great, but still, hey, they're welcome changes. But the biggest thing, in my opinion, for spells is that healing spells are actually good now. Like, healing spells are actually useful for something besides just getting your party members back up when they reach 0 HP. In the past, I feel like that's one of the only things healing spells were good for. You, at least occasionally, realistically, most people didn't really use healing spells to keep their party topped up. I mean, they did, but they weren't the best at that, because Cure Wounds, it was like, okay, 1d8 plus maybe 3 or 4 if you're lucky at level 1, and an early level enemy like a bugbear could just smash right through that healing that you got. But now healing spells are actually great. They're actually pretty dang useful. So Cure Wounds, and this I think extends for most of them as well, or at least they got similar buffs. Cure Wounds, instead of 1d8 plus your modifier in healing, it's now 2d8 right out of the gate. And every time you upcast a spell, it's an additional 2d8, which means a level 2 Cure Wounds heals 4d8. That is crazy awesome, and it makes healing so much more useful. And I don't know if some people are going to say that's broken. Me personally, I don't care, because if a spellcaster is going to use their entire spell slot in action for that, I think it's valid. And the same now extends to your monsters and your creatures that also have these spells. So I don't really see it as a big deal. Healing Word got the same amount of love, where instead of 1d4, it's now 2d4. And that, again, an extra 2d4 per spell slot, which makes it, as a bonus action ranged healing, 4d4 plus modifier at level 2 spellcasting for level 3 characters, or at least for full casters. That is so dang cool, and you'll love to see it. Inflict Wounds is no longer a spell attack, it's a con save now, and there's some other changes in here as well. Sleep is no longer based on hit points, it's now a wisdom saving throw, and it's only one target instead of multiple ones. So there's some changes that people are going to love, some changes that people are going to hate, but for the most part, I do think all of the changes are welcome ones. And there was some stuff added too, like Summon Beast. Again, I use the 5e spells mod version of this spell by having the 2024 all-in-one mod above it in the load order. But for those of you that are only going to use this mod, Summon Beast is here. It was added. You can summon an eagle. Spiritual Weapon got a nerf, but I believe it's honestly a welcome one. It now requires concentration. There was some other stuff added too, like Summon Fae was added. Very welcome. Summon Aberration was added. So lots of cool new toys to play with. But as you can see, a lot of the existing spells did also get adjusted, which I think is just amazing. And here are some of the changes to feats. I don't know if all of this is implemented correctly, because last I checked for alert for Baldur's Gate 3, it still works like the old alert did, or maybe I didn't pick it properly. I am not 100% sure if I messed something up, but the way it's supposed to work now is instead of not being able to be surprised in Baldur's Gate 3, you just add your proficiency bonus to your initiative rolls. I think that's great. Some other feats did get some changes as well. Healer, when casting a spell, you regain additional hit points. I don't know if that was always the case, but the learn battle medic action that was added via this mod, and it is amazing. I love that. And there's just some other goodies here as well. Fighting styles got some love too. Like this Mariner fighting style is ridiculous. It's so cool. As long as you are not wearing heavy armor or using a shield, your movement speed increases by 10 feet and you gain a plus 1 to your AC. That is great for dual wielders, but there's some other dope fighting styles too, like Druidic or Blessed Warrior. For, so instead of taking a fighting style and getting something that helps with your martial prowess, essentially, you could just say, hey, I'm gonna learn more cantrips as a ranger or paladin. I think that's really cool. And now we are back towards the top of the list with races. The race changes are cool. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the race changes were dope, but they just have some of the least amount of impact on gameplay in terms of this new version of D&D and by extension this mod, in my opinion. But there's still some cool stuff here. Don't get me wrong, Dragonborn at level 5 can just fly. That is just something they can do now. Once per long rest, they can just fly for 10 minutes. They just get either they get these spectral wings that just appear, and they just have a fly speed equal to their ground speed now. That's cool. That's amazing. Like, I'm not too into Dragonborn, but I'm tempted now. There's some other stuff as well. Gith Zerai was added to the Gith Yankee. I don't know if that's actually in the PHB. That might be something this mod author just added themselves. I don't know. I'll have to double check that. Could be. Half elf in the actual official PHB, half races in general, I think kind of got shafted. So I won't go into detail. That's a whole rant I'm not going to talk about, but it's nice that this mod author did throw them a bone by giving them resourceful. So they get a heroic, essentially they gain 1 inspiration that they can use for free per day. It's a nice little bone that they threw them. Humans get the same thing, but also at level 1, they now get to pick an additional origin feat of their choice. So at level 1, humans are getting 2 feats for free. Crazy stuff there, and honestly I love it. And then as you can see, the new Goliath race was added. Goliath did exist in D&D before this new version of it from 2024, but it wasn't in the player's handbook as far as I remember. At least I don't think it was, and now it is here. They get some really cool stuff, like if you are a cloud based Goliath, you can just teleport as a bonus action for 60 feet. That's crazy range. It's not unlimited. They can only use it equal to their proficiency bonus times per day, but still that's some incredibly dope stuff. And at level 5, they can all turn large as a bonus action as well. Goliaths are really cool in this game. Not my cup of tea as far as races are concerned, but I might actually play one because they get some dope toys to play with, to be honest. And also Asimar, I think I pronounce it Asimar. I'm gonna say Asimar. The Asimar race was included in the new player's handbook for Dungeons and Dragons 2024, but it isn't here. However, for those of you that want to play one, there is a really amazing Asimar mod on Nexus Mods, and I think the other websites, other places as well. It is a fantastic mod, and honestly, I think as far as what I was able to read, the Asimar and that mod function pretty close to how they function in the new version of D&D, so not much difference there. Okay, woo-wee. That was a mouthful. All right, that was a mouthful. I hope though you can see now just how expansive this mod is, just how much all these things I said, again, it's all in one, does drastically overhaul the experience, the playing of Baldur's Gate 3, because that's what D&D 2024 does for the 5e version that came out back in 2014. It's a really nice overhaul in my opinion. A bunch of these, if not, I would say the overwhelming majority of these changes are welcome changes, at least in my opinion. That is going to be subjective from person to person, but nevertheless, regardless of your opinion on these changes, the fact of the matter is, if you're looking for a new way to experience Baldur's Gate 3, this mod does it, and as you can tell by everything I just went over with you, it does it in spades. If you're looking for a mod to really freshen up your experience. If you know, having, let's say, post Baldur's Gate 3 depression essentially, and you played Baldur's Gate 3 and you're trying to find that same level of satisfaction in other RPGs and you're just not getting it, and it's like, dang, am I really gonna go back and play Baldur's Gate 3 for like the 6th, 7th time? Yes, you probably are, but you should use this mod first and those accessory ones that I mentioned, so at least make your experience as new and refreshing as it could possibly be. There are some other great CRPGs out there though. If you are on a post Baldur's Gate 3 depression, like if you've been looking for something else to scratch that itch, I would recommend you play games like Solasta, with Solasta 2 coming out, Pathfinder games, the Wrath of the Righteous and Kingmaker. While not my cup of tea, they are, I still cannot lie, they are phenomenal CRPGs. Even if they weren't for me personally, they're just a bit too complex, but they are amazing and I cannot deny that. You got the, what is it called, Pillar of Eternity games. You got Larian's other RPGs, Divinity Original Sin. But yeah, if you're sticking to Baldur's Gate 3, I would definitely give this mod a try. After being, I'm almost done with Act 1 of a playthrough with this mod now, alongside my wife. We've been doing multiplayer and we've been having just an absolute blast. So this mod right here is an easy recommend. Definitely, I would say give it a shot. And excellent work to you, Moon Sick. Thank you so much for doing all this for us fans, essentially creating such an expansive and comprehensive new way to experience the game. And yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. Let me know what your thoughts are below on this mod, just from first impressions, but also give me your opinions on the new version of DnD 2024, 5.5e, whatever you call it. Me personally, I'm a fan of everything involved in it so far, but also give me your thoughts on everything as well. And that's gonna do it for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate y'all, and I am gonna catch you on the next one. Y'all be easy. Oh, but my mic. Y'all be easy.